Imagine there you are in the upper room, Easter Sunday morning, 33 AD. This room has become the locus for everything that's happened in the last week, a week that is exhausting, a week that has made you perplexed, a week that's made you more confused than ever. You remember last Sunday how you were there and you watched as this great crowd followed him into Jerusalem, hailing him as the Messiah, waving in their branches and singing Hosanna, fulfilling the Feast of Tabernacles. You watched later on in the week as he went to the temple, how he took a whip and drove out people who were corrupting the temple. You saw the anger of those religious authorities as to what was happening, and you began to be worried about him. And all of a sudden you came to this place, this upper room, and you remembered how 4 days ago, here is the one who we hail as the Messiah, got down and washed our feet. And then he went to table to celebrate the Passover feast and took bread and wine and said, "This is my body, this is my blood." And you were in wonderment and confusion as to what was happening. And you saw the look of love on his eyes, but you also saw the look of sorrow on his face as well too. And you didn't know what was going to happen next. And then all of a sudden we left the upper room and we went to the garden. I remember falling asleep. We had a lot of carbs at the Passover meal. When I awoke, he was sweating blood, and he was in deep sorrow. And in the confusion of what was happening, we saw Judas come with bands of guards, with torches and weapons, and they arrested him, and they took him away, and I ran. We all bolted. We could be next. We could be going through the same thing that he's about to suffer. We didn't know what was happening, and we've been locked in this upper room for 3 days. And the only one of us who had enough courage to go out into the streets was John. And John came back in and told us what he saw. He saw Jesus being brought to the Sanhedrin and being tried, and then brought to Pilate. And then all of a sudden he was taken away, and when he came back in front of the people, he was scourged. He suffered brutal Roman scourging, and he had a crown of thorns on his head, and they condemned him as a criminal, and they killed him on Calvary. John told us this. Imagine the fear in the disciples and apostles that day. They didn't know if that was going to happen to them. They didn't know if the next knock at the door would be Roman legions coming to take them. Let alone, here is the guy we hailed as Messiah. 6 days ago, we had a huge parade for him. We thought he was going to come in and take the city because that's what the Messiah was supposed to do. And now he's dead. And we have no idea what we're doing. We've been with him for 3 years, and now we're just locked in fear and in grief. All of a sudden, the door opens, and running through the door is Mary from Magdala, and Mary, the mother of James and Salome. They're disheveled. They're crying. They're also filled with joy. You could tell they're shaken. Mary still has in her hand some linens that she was about to place on the body. And almost out of breath, she shouts, "I've seen him. He's alive." "What are you smoking, Mary?" "I saw him. We went to the tomb to anoint the body. We didn't have enough time to get this because the Sabbath was falling. And so we went this morning. We didn't even know who was going to roll away the stone for us. But we just went. And when we got there, I saw him. And I didn't recognize him until he said my name, Mary. And he told me to come here and tell you that he is alive." You could see the look of confusion on the apostles. "Really?" And then Thomas quips, "Well, maybe he didn't really die. Maybe with all of that pain, he just passed out. And then within a couple hours, he revived, and Maybe he popped the stone away. And John says, no. You clearly don't know Roman crucifixion. The people who killed Jesus knew how to kill someone. In fact, that was their job. They made sure someone was dead. Jesus should have been dead just from the scourging at the pillar, being whipped with a flagellum with 9 little cords with pieces of metal and glass attached to them that would grab into your skin and rip your skin. His back would have looked like ribbons hanging from it. The amount of pain and shock and grief would have killed him just from the scourging. No, he was dead. And to make sure that he was dead, they threw a lance in his side, and water and blood came forth as they pierced his heart. No, he was dead. I saw him die. That's Roman crucifixion. James says, well, maybe someone stole the body. And Peter says, who? Have you haven't noticed? We're all locked in this room. The disciples were full of fear because they thought they were going to get it next. There is no way any member of those disciples would have went, because they also would have been scared that they would have been meeting the Roman legions who were standing guard, let alone have enough courage to steal the body. There was way too much fear in that room. Well, maybe someone overpowered the guards. You know from Scripture that the tomb was sealed. That just didn't happen with Jesus. That was an actual custom among the legionaries. It's in the Roman manuals. There was a core group of a cohort from anywhere from 5 to 8, and they would seal a tomb. And the first thing they would do to seal a tomb is they would go in to make sure the person in the wrappings is the person who was killed. So they probably would have drugged Joseph of Arimathea or someone who was there to make sure that that was Jesus and to identify the body. And then they would have scoped inside the tomb area to make sure no one was left in there. Then they would have went out and they would have rolled the stone, which probably weighed close to a half a ton. It took a lot of people actually just to roll it down a small little hill in place. And then the sealing of a Roman tomb was they took pieces of rope and they basically almost made a cross around the tomb, 2 pieces of rope crossways and down, and then they would seal it on the corners with wax. And then whoever ordered the sealing of the tomb, their seal would be in the middle of it, Pilate's. And then they would keep watch, anywhere from 48 hours to 72 hours. There would at least be 5 in front of the tomb at all times. And they would have to be awake, because the punishment for a Roman centurion to fall asleep on the job was death. There's also some Roman manuals that talk about how they would have tied ropes to their arms and ropes to their feet. So if Longinus over here starts getting tired, they would have pulled his arm to wake him up. Because if he fell asleep, they all died. Not just him, but the 5 watching the tomb. There's no way they were asleep. The apostles all look at each other. Then what? And all of a sudden in their midst appears Jesus, risen. You could imagine the first feeling of the apostles. I'm sure there was guilt because they ran away, but all they had to do was look in his eyes of love to realize that they were forgiven. I'm sure he had tears in his eyes as he was greeting them for the first time. I don't know if you've had a chance to go see the movie that's out called Risen. It's very, very powerful. And one of my favorite scenes is you see Jesus on that Easter morning, and he has the apostles like this, and they're all laughing and crying. That first embrace of pure joy. My brothers and sisters, Jesus Christ is risen from the dead. He is alive, and he has risen. This is our hope. This is our joy. This is what it means to be a Christian. We believe that he is the Messiah. We believe that he stepped out and conquered death. Why? To show us that love does not know death. To destroy our greatest enemy, which is death itself. So no longer do we have separation from God. We have become one with him, and he and us. Nothing can separate us now from the love of God. And for us who believe, death is no longer the end, but a change of address. This is our hope. This is our belief. And this is what caused those band of frightened apostles to run out of that upper room and begin to preach him risen and alive, because they saw him and they touched him and they were completely transformed, and there was nothing that could make them afraid ever again, because love has triumphed and love has won. We are witnesses to that reality. It has been passed down from generation to generation. Millions of people standing up to believe that Jesus Christ has been risen from the dead, that he is our Messiah, that he is our hope, and that we no longer have fear and we live now in love. You are witnesses to these things. I am witnesses to these things. I know him to be risen and alive. I've seen him. I've touched him in you. I've watched his grace work in our lives. He is active. He is alive. And he is bringing us home to the Father. You all who are about to be baptized are called to be witnesses to these things. Just as Peter and the apostles and the women and the disciples went out to proclaim this love that knows no end, you are about to walk into this water to be baptized into that resurrection and to proclaim that love to the ends of the earth. In fact, we all are. So today, sing and shout and rejoice. Alleluia! Christ is risen.